Alright, so I know it's been a super fat minute since I've done a video for you guys, but haven't really been home, haven't really been able to work on the car. So right now we have the car on stock suspension. We got some Honda Civic wheels. I had to borrow from my buddy because I did the 5x114 hub swap, so the Prius stocks didn't work out anymore. But we're going to be putting this back to stance, but with a slightly different setup this time. So over here we have a Premier 8 J-line axle from Japan. So this is already has the end plates where the wheel hubs bolt up to. Those are tilted at 10 degrees, and then we have 30 millimeters of built-in drop for caster correction. Should be solid. This white thing is just a TRD rear sway bar. I had that on the original axle, but I moved it over to this one. That basically just helps the beam stay a lot more stiff, reduce flexing. Got our Broadway static true rear conversion coilovers here. And this video is mostly going to be focused on the rear. That's all we're going to be doing for now. Additionally, we also have this rear strut brace from Ultra Racing. So this ties the true rear coils together just to reduce flexing within the trunk area. Since this wasn't designed to originally be a true setup, it was originally divorced. So the spring sat in this bucket, the strut bolts up here. But we no longer use the spring in this bucket, so that's not taking the primary brunt of the force. All the force is being transferred to the strut itself, so that's why I have the brace in there to prevent blowing out the tops of the rear strut towers. For those of you wondering where to get this axle, I mean, if you guys have a really good fab guy, you can have someone fab one up. If you take an OEM one, basically chop these ends off, weld them on. The hardest part about fabbing one up is actually getting the toe proper, because it's going to depend on how low you make the car. That'll depend on where the axle angle is going to sit and what the toe needs to be for optimal angle. But this one is a second hand. A guy in California bought this from Kruber, I believe, and then he then posted it up for sale and I was able to buy it. So I bought this in California and then dragged it back to Hawaii with me, and now it's going to go in my car, so hopefully it all works out. So for those of you that don't know, the way I jack up the rear of the car is just put the jack right underneath this rear tow hook that sticks out right under there. I like this spot for jacking because even when the car is pretty low, you can still gain pretty good access to it. So it's a nice convenient jack point for the rear. So just to recap, the stock struts, and actually the new ones too, poke through the strut towers here. The strut brace goes in between those two strut towers. And then the OEM rear suspension is this super long strut and then the spring inside the spring bucket. But once we put the coils in, it's going to just be one joined unit. So before I drop the OEM spring and strut, I'm actually going to go ahead and start disconnecting everything that's mounted to the OEM axle beam here. So we got the ABS line here that's connected to a bracket. We got the brake hard line connected to a bracket. All this stuff's going to come out and then it's going to be mounted to the new axle beam. One of the things that's going to be tricky is this bracket here. So one of the things I saw online is that you can Dremel out this portion to slide this bracket or slide this brake line out of the bracket. So hopefully that works, but we're going to see what happens. That'll probably be the last thing I'm going to remove. So we removed the two nuts right there for the brackets right here, and then what I'm going to do is just go ahead and put them on the new one for now, just so we don't lose them and we know where they go. Alright, so what we ended up doing was using this angle grinder, making an incision right on the side there, and then we're basically just going to bend and pry this bracket open, and then we should be able to get the brake line out. Not enough. Ta-da. Alright, so now we have every single thing removed. We got the ABS bracket off, brake line bracket, we got the caliper hanging right there. E-brake line is removed. We went ahead and loosened the two frame bolts, 19mm on either side, so that we can troop the axle. The very last thing we need to do is cut this brake line bracket. It's going to be a little bit hard to get to, but once we cut that, we can slide the brake line out of there, and then we should be good to remove the OEM axle beam. We got the last brake line bracket out, so I cut it from the bottom, and then I was able to pry this out and then move it above it, so that once this axle beam comes out, this will just be left here hanging and then ready to install into the new axle beam. Alright, we finally got this out of the bracket. Took a little bit of hammering and prying, but we got both sides out. It's supported by the jack right now, so we're gonna be able to move this out. And there is the OEM axle beam. So here's a quick little side-by-side comparison of the two axles. So obviously we have the TRD rear sway bar moved to the new one. And then if you look at the end plates here, this is the original one, just welded for 0 camber. And then this is the modified one, which is supposed to be -10 with the proper toe correction. This has also been raised up 30 millimeters, so that should help the caster. And I believe that's it, but now we're gonna do everything in the reverse order, except we're gonna put everything back on the new axle beam. Alright. Okay, so we got the new axle in. This was kind of hard. We had to go back and forth and communicate and kind of wiggle it into place until we were able to get the bushings to line up, but it ended up working out. So now what we're going to be doing is reconnecting everything that we disconnected on the original one. So brake line brackets, ABS, e-brake, etc. Then once we come over here, we'll be able to put on the hub, the caliper, and then we should essentially be good to go. We're going to try and get this into the ride height position first before we torque this bolt down, so that we're not putting any unnecessary tension on that bushing in there. We now have everything on, connected, torque down except that. What we're going to do now is put the strut here so that we can get the desired height, and then after that we'll be able to torque that bolt down. But if you're curious about any of these torque specs, they're all in my shims video because I had to take apart all this stuff, so we just did that over again for this one. Alright, so for starters, we still haven't connected the coilover yet. We just jacked up the beam to see how the fitment would be, and it is actually perfect for tucking, so I got a little bit of clearance on both ends. I'm not sure if the car will actually be this low, but we just wanted to see the range of motion that we'd be able to do. And as you can see, the caster correction is not too bad, so the wheel didn't move too far forward, and that's thanks to that 30 millimeter drop that's built into the axle. But yeah, it definitely worked out really nice. Okay, I lied. I'm getting ready to button up the front, so just a quick recap of the front. So we are running 2 camber bolts. The top bolt is running facing inwards, the bottom bolt is running facing outwards. We currently don't have the roll center adjusters on. I'm going to be running a different variant that should correct the caster a little bit, so we're going to wait on those. And then up top we have D2 top hats still. These are going to be swapped out with the Low Life Projects top hats. I'm getting a new pair of them because I had to give my other pair to a friend. So once all that is in, the front should have a little bit more camber. I'm not sure if it'll be enough to run with a spacer, but we'll see. But that's the front setup we're going to go with right now, just because that's all I have available on hand. If we take a look at the other side, this one's pretty much done. I might adjust the height a little bit. I obviously still have to align it, but the wheel is set up to pass maybe just under the fender, so I think it'll work out. The last thing I'll have to do is probably set it on the ground, align it obviously, and then level it. So I'll try to tweak the front ride height so that there's no rake and I can match the rear. But that is pretty much it. I think this is going to be my last clip for the video. So rears turned out awesome. Fronts, we're still waiting on more parts, but we're going to get it together as best as we can with what we have on hand. So thank you guys for watching.